There's a video, maybe 4 minutes long, shot on someone's phone, a little shaky because the person holding it was being jostled from the left, and, in that 4 minutes, something happens that lasts about 3 seconds. 3 seconds. That's all it takes to make the entire internet stop scrolling. I was standing 12 feet away when it happened. And, I've thought about those 3 seconds probably more than I should. Cardiff in November is a particular kind of cold. Not the brutal, bone-cracking cold you get up north. More like the cold that sneaks in at the collar, under your scarf, the kind that makes your eyes water even when you're not sad about anything. The sky that morning was the color of old pewter, not storm gray, not dramatic, just that flat, tired gray that Wales does better than anywhere in the world. Like the sky itself had given up trying to be interesting. I'd been standing on St. Mary Street since 9:15. It was now 11:47. My feet had graduated from uncomfortable to numb somewhere around the 40-minute mark, and I'd eaten 2 cereal bars from my jacket pocket that I didn't even remember putting there. The woman to my right had a thermos. She did not offer to share it. I respected that about her. The crowd had built up slowly, the way royal crowds always do, not a stampede, not a rush, just a gradual thickening of people until suddenly, you couldn't move without pressing your shoulder into someone else's shoulder. Families. Tourists with lanyards. A school group in matching yellow high-vis jackets who were absolutely not going to be able to see anything but, were wildly enthusiastic about being there. A man in his 60s wearing a Union Jack waistcoat over a fleece. A girl, maybe 7, holding a small Welsh flag in each hand, her arms already getting tired but, her face set with the fierce determination of someone who had decided she was going to wave those flags if it killed her. The visit was part of a regional engagement tour, William and Catherine doing what the palace schedules call walkabout, which is the official word for what the rest of us would describe as walking very slowly along a barrier while strangers hand you flowers and say things to you that you're too polite to not respond to. It sounds exhausting, actually. You stand for hours waiting for them, and then, they're moving, always moving, and you get maybe 12 seconds of proximity before there are already 4 people down the line. The Welsh Guards had been stationed at intervals along the route. Police in high-visibility jackets stood at the corners. Local council officials clustered near the temporary stage that had been erected at the far end of the street, where a children's choir was going to perform. I could hear them doing a sound check from where I stood, the thin, reedy sound of a piano accordion drifting over the crowd noise. At 11:53, a murmur went through the back of the crowd. Then, the woman with the thermos said, quiet and, almost to herself, "They're here." The thing about watching a royal walkabout from 12 feet away, or any distance, really, is that you spend 90% of the time watching other people watch them. The crowd becomes its own show. An elderly man near the front barrier pressed both hands flat to his chest when he saw her, like he was trying to hold his own heart in. The 7-year-old girl began waving her flags with renewed, almost violent energy. They came into view together, William on the left side of the barrier, Catherine on the right, which means they were working opposite sides of the crowd, which is standard. Efficient. You cover twice the ground. But, it means they're not standing beside each other. They're 2 separate performances happening simultaneously. I was on Catherine's side. She was wearing a deep forest green coat, belted at the waist. Her hair was down. She looked, objectively, like someone had designed a person specifically to stand in a grey Welsh street and make it look like a painting. She had that quality that photographs badly capture, an aliveness to her movements, a warmth that was entirely unforced. She crouched down to talk to a small boy near the barrier. She accepted a bunch of daffodils from a woman who looked like she might cry. She didn't rush. She never looked like she was rushing. William was maybe 20 feet to my left, doing the same, handshakes, brief conversations, the polite receiving of small gifts and flowers. He's taller in person than I expected. Not movie tall, but tall enough that you notice it. He has a way of tilting his head forward when he's listening that makes it seem like he's genuinely concentrating. The walk was going well. The crowd was warm, the choir had begun performing, the gray sky had even lightened marginally. And, then, they converged. The walkabout had a natural pinch point, a narrowing of the pedestrianized street where a temporary barrier setup created a bottleneck, and both sides of the crowd funneled toward the same spot. Protocol meant they would briefly walk side by side through that section before splitting again at the stage. William crossed first. Settled into step beside her. She was mid-conversation with someone at the barrier, a teenager who was trying to say something and, laughing about it, clearly nervous. Catherine had her head tilted, listening, smiling. William reached out. Not a grab. Not a tug. Just a light, instinctive touch, his hand at the small of her back, the kind of gesture that says we need to keep moving without breaking her conversation. She moved. But the hand didn't follow. She took a half step forward, and his hand stayed where it started, floating in that half second of air where her back had just been. And then, he lowered it. Not awkwardly, not dramatically. Just quietly. His arm came back to his side, and he matched her pace, and the walk continued. 4 seconds. Maybe less. But the camera caught it. I didn't process it standing there in the crowd. You don't, in the moment you're watching two people move through a sea of strangers, your brain is tracking too many things at once, and 3 seconds of physical subtext doesn't register consciously the way it does later, on a screen, slowed down, with 200,000 people in the comments section telling you exactly what it means. The woman with the thermos noticed, though. She made a sound. Not a word, more like a small, involuntary exhale. Like when you see a car almost miss a cyclist. I looked at her. She was still watching them, her thermos held in both hands, her expression doing something complicated. "Did you see that?" she said. "See what?" She didn't answer. She just kept watching. The choir had moved into their second song, something traditional and, Welsh that I didn't know the words to, but that sounded like rain sounds like, if rain were music. Catherine had reached the front of the temporary stage and was now speaking with two of the choir's organizers. William was half a step behind her and to the left. He had one hand in his pocket. Nothing else happened. The visit concluded. The car arrived. They left. I walked to the car park trying to figure out why the woman with the thermos had looked at me like that, and came up empty, and drove home, and forgot about it until 3 days later when the clip appeared on my timeline. Someone had been directly opposite me, on the other side of the crowd, with a better angle and a steadier hand. They'd caught it cleanly, his hand, her back, the fractional delay, the return to his side. Someone had even slowed it down to 50% speed, which made it look more clinical and more intimate at the same time, the way slow motion always does. The comments were doing what comments do. But I kept looking at his face in the moment after. Not hers was already turned away, still mid-conversation. His. He looked like a man who had done something by instinct and then remembered, mid-gesture, to think about it. There is a particular expression that people wear when they catch themselves doing something automatic, reaching for a phone that isn't in that pocket anymore, turning to say something to someone who left the room. A brief recalibration. A tiny, private pause. That was the expression. The gesture was nothing. People get 100 gestures wrong in public 100 times a day. A half second of misjudged physical timing, two people moving at different rhythms. But the internet is very good at taking half seconds and building houses inside them. The palace didn't comment. They never comment on clips like this, which is the correct strategy and which also guarantees that everyone will keep talking about it indefinitely. 3 royal commentators appeared on 3 separate morning programs within 48 hours. One said it was nothing. One said body language never lies. The third one said something about the public's investment in royal relationships that was the most careful way of saying people really want to believe something is wrong here that I've ever heard. The woman with the thermos, I never got her name, I thought about sending her a message somehow. A general, did you see the clip, flung into the universe? I didn't. But I did think about what she'd noticed before anyone had a camera in their hand. Before the slowing down and the analysis and the comment sections. She'd seen it with her own eyes, in real time, in a cold grey Cardiff street. And she'd made that sound. That involuntary exhale. Like a small, held breath releasing. The charity polo match was held on a Saturday in late June, and the kind of June day that England produces 2 or 3 times a summer and, then, takes back before you've properly appreciated it. The sky was actual blue, not grey blue, not the kind of blue that's thinking about becoming grey, but high, clear, extravagant blue. The kind that makes you squint before you've even looked at anything bright. The ground was a private estate in Berkshire, the kind of property that has a gravel driveway long enough that you can't see the house from the gate. The polo pitches, 2 of them, side by side, were that specific shade of summer green that's so saturated it looks almost artificial. White boards at the edges. Tents in cream and navy down the far side for sponsors and guests. The whole thing had the curated quality of something designed to look effortlessly natural. The match was raising money for 2 charities, one related to mental health and young men, one focused on rural community programs. The kind of event that isn't really about the polo. It's about the pictures, and the coverage, and the quiet, expensive machinery of royal philanthropy doing its work. I was in the press pen on the north side of the main pitch. 12 of us, I think cameras, some with video rigs, one very tall man from a German magazine who kept accidentally hitting people with his monopod. The pen was roped off about 40 meters from the guest enclosure, which meant my 400mm was earning its weight. The royal party arrived at 1:30. There was a group of them, William and Catherine, 2 other couples I recognized as close friends, a cluster of people associated with the organizing charity. The kind of easygoing social arrangement where there's genuine warmth in the group and, you can tell, even from 40 meters through a long lens, that these are people who actually like each other. Catherine had brought the children, not all 3, just the younger 2, who were in the guest enclosure under the supervision of someone I assumed was staff, a composed woman in a pale shirt who spent the afternoon achieving the near impossible task of keeping 2 children reasonably still in a situation containing horses, grass, and a large crowd. William was playing. He'd be in the match. He was already changed, team colors, boots, that slightly different posture that athletes get when they're in gear, when the body is already beginning its warm-up before the mind catches up. The 30 minutes before the match started were the interesting part. Because for 30 minutes, they were just 2 people at a party. They circulated. William moved through the guest enclosure with the ease of someone who genuinely enjoys being at events like this. He's good at parties in a way that royals aren't always assumed to be. He laughs with his whole face, he asks questions and appears to actually retain the answers. Catherine was a few feet away, talking with the organizing charities director, leaning forward slightly in that particular way she has when she's absorbing something important. The German photographer to my left kept muttering something I couldn't fully hear, but that seemed to be an ongoing commentary on the light. I was watching William. He finished a conversation. Turned. Located her across the enclosure, that unconscious radar of couples, the automatic tracking of each other's position in a room. He started moving toward her. She didn't see him coming because she was still engaged with the director, and, in the 3 seconds it took him to cross the space, her conversation reached what appeared to be a funny moment. Something the director said landed, and she laughed. Properly laughed. Head back, hand to her collarbone, the kind of laugh that is not performed for a room but that escapes. William arrived at her side at the exact moment of the laugh. And he stopped. Not stopped. He didn't freeze or jolt. But there was a pause, a microbeat, a single half-step where his momentum slowed in a way that was just visible enough, just slightly discordant enough, that my hand tightened on the camera. He smiled. That part one want to be specific about. Because the smile happened. It was real in the technical sense, the mouth moved, the eyes crinkled at the corners. But it arrived maybe 1 beat late. Like the laugh had happened on the wrong channel and his face had to switch frequencies to receive it. She saw him then. Her laugh had already crested and was fading, and she turned to include him in whatever the joke had been, gesturing lightly at the director as if to say, "You have to hear this." He nodded. Made the appropriate sounds. Asked the director to repeat it. The director repeated it. And everyone laughed, including William, and the laugh was fine, it was perfectly ordinary, and for the next 20 minutes they circulated together through the enclosure like a couple who were easy in each other's company, who have been easy in each other's company for a very long time. I kept shooting. But I kept thinking about that half step. The thing about a long lens is it creates a strange intimacy. You are 40 meters away and, yet you are, in terms of what you can see, 5 feet away. Closer than a guest. Closer, sometimes, than any of the friends in the enclosure. You see the technical stuff, the adjusted collar, the touch of a sleeve, the brief downward glance that means I'm tired but I'm not going to show it. After years of doing this, you develop a vocabulary for what bodies are saying when mouths are saying something else. I have never been able to fully explain what that half step looked like. Not in a way that doesn't sound like I'm reading too much into nothing. The best I can do is this: when you arrive at something that's already finished, a celebration that's peaked, a punchline that's already landed, there is a specific feeling of being one beat outside the moment. Not excluded. Just half a second behind the door closing. That was what the half step looked like. A man who arrived half a second behind a closed door. Now. I know what you're doing right now, which is building an entire structure inside that image, adding walls and rooms and history. I did the same thing. The press pen does it. The internet does it worse. But here's what I also know, because I was there and the clips weren't. 20 minutes later, before William went to get his horse, they had a brief exchange at the edge of the enclosure, private, short, the kind of exchange that is not for show because the show was happening 30 feet to their left. She said something to him and he ducked his head close to hear it and then straightened up and touched her hand, not her back, not a performance, just a quick, 2-second press of his hand over hers, and walked toward the stables. Nobody filmed that bit. The polo match was good. William's team won. He was genuinely good on the horse, not gracefully good, but competitively good, the kind of player who commits to the ball with his full body weight and occasionally looks mildly irritated when he misses. Catherine watched with the children from the guest enclosure, and, at one point I caught her lifting the younger one onto her hip so they could see over the fence, pointing toward William on the far side of the pitch. The child pointed back. She laughed again. That one I got on camera too. But it won't be the one anyone searches for. The clip that circulated was a low-res, wide-angle video taken by someone in the public viewing area, not even in the enclosure, shot at distance with a phone. The half-step was barely visible at that resolution. It looked more like a natural pause than anything. But the comments section built a documentary out of it. I published some of the polo shots. The ones of him competing. A couple of her with the children. The press agency bought the package. I kept the one with the half-step on my hard drive. Haven't published it. Not because it proves anything, it doesn't. But because something about that image still feels private. A man arriving half a second late to a laugh. There are 1,000 reasons why that happens. I couldn't tell you which one it was. The hospital visit had been planned for 3 weeks. The kind of planning that transforms a working NHS ward into something that can receive 2 of the most photographed people in the world without disrupting patient care, which involves a degree of logistical effort that I suspect is genuinely underappreciated. Staff briefings. Press briefing packs. Approved photography zones, non-photography zones, patient consent documentation for families who agreed to the possibility of their child appearing in background photos. The ward manager, a woman named Diane who ran the children's unit with the focused authority of a military logistics officer and the warmth of someone who had chosen that specific job for the right reasons, had been in back-to-back prep meetings all week. The visit was a joint one. Both William and Catherine focused on a new play therapy suite that had been funded partly through their foundation's work. The idea was to see the space, meet some of the children and families, talk with the therapy staff about what the program involved, and then move to a brief press opportunity in the atrium at the end. By the time I'd retrieved my seating charts from the West Corridor photocopier and was heading back, about 20 minutes into the visit, the tour of the play suite was finishing up. The connecting corridor was quiet. 2 protection officers at the far end. A communications aide near the wall with a phone in her hand. A photographer from the approved pool, already packing his kit because the press portion was moving to the atrium. I walked through that corridor every day. I didn't slow down. Then, I slowed down. Because at the entrance to the main children's ward at the door, the actual door, the one with the finger-painting window decoration that the children's art group had done in October, they were standing. Not inside. Not walking. standing at the door, and there was something wrong with the shape of the moment. I should explain what a normal exiting a ward moment looks like. It's coordinated. There's a flow to it. The visit concludes, the ward manager escorts the guests to the corridor, brief goodbyes are exchanged, and then, the protection team guides the movement toward the next location. It has a direction. A forward momentum. Even when it involves two people who are entirely comfortable with the ceremonial choreography of their public lives, it moves. This wasn't moving. They were standing, William slightly closer to the door, Catherine half a step behind and, to his left, and, between them and, the ward manager, who was on the other side of the door and, appeared to be gesturing towards something inside. There was the specific, particular quality of a conversation that has reached a disagreement and, is working out, very quietly and, without raising voices, how to handle it. I am not going to claim I could hear anything. The corridor had ambient hospital noise, a PA system murmur, the distant sound of a trolley on linoleum, a child's voice from somewhere behind the door. I was 30 feet away, minimum, and I had stopped walking not because I'd decided to stop but because my body had processed something before my brain caught up with it. The communications aide near the wall had the expression of someone professionally trained to look calm who was currently at the upper edge of their calm-looking capacity. The pool photographer had stopped packing his kit. What I pieced together afterward, from Diane, who was discreet but who trusts me, and from the communications aide, who said nothing useful but whose face said several things, was this: there had been a family in the play therapy suite. A family who had not originally been on the list for that part of the visit, not because of any failure in planning but because they had arrived that morning for an appointment that was supposed to be in a different section of the ward and had ended up, through the particular ungovernable logic of hospital scheduling, in exactly the room the visit was touring through. The family had a child. The child was young. The child's situation was not one I'm going to describe because it's not mine to describe and because it doesn't matter to this story. What matters is that Catherine had stopped the tour. Not loudly. Not in a way that disrupted anything. But she had, according to what Diane told me, 3 weeks later, in the car park, in that way where someone tells you something because they think it should be known but doesn't want to make a press event of it, she had sat down on the floor next to the child, on the actual floor, and stayed there for close to 10 minutes while the rest of the tour group stood around and the schedule quietly went up in flames. William had stayed too. But here is the part Diane described to me with a specificity that made me believe it completely. At some point during those 10 minutes, Catherine had looked up at him. Just a look. Not a question, exactly. More like, are you here? Or maybe, am I doing this right? Or maybe something with no words at all. The look that passes between two people who have been doing this long enough to have a shorthand for the difficult moments. And he had looked back at her. And something had apparently passed between those two looks that had shifted the dynamic in the room. Diane said the therapy staff had noticed it. One of them had mentioned it afterward, not in a critical way, more in the way that people who work with human beings in difficult situations notice when two people are genuinely, quietly, navigating something together versus performing their way through it. It was after that, after the family visit, after the room, that they'd reached the door. And the conversation at the door was about the press opportunity in the atrium. I say conversation, but I mean the specific kind of quiet exchange that is not an argument but is also not an agreement. From 30 feet away, what I could observe was, William's body language had the shape of we need to keep to the schedule, not aggressive, not unkind, pragmatic. I want to be accurate about this because the clip shot by the pool photographer who had also not resumed packing his kit does not capture nuance well and has since been captioned in 17 different ways across 17 different platforms, most of them wrong. She was just still. The way people are still when they have just left a room that required something from them, and the world outside the room is already asking for the next thing, and the body needs one more second before it can give the next thing honestly. William saw it. And then, something happened that I think about more than anything else from that corridor. He stopped talking. Just stopped. Mid whatever he was saying. Looked at her. Not the communications aide, not the protection officer, not the ward manager still hovering in the doorway. Her. He waited. She breathed. She nodded. They walked toward the atrium. The press opportunity was fine. They were warm with the staff, gracious with the group photo, said the right things about the play therapy program and what it meant for the children in the ward. The communications aide had recovered her composure completely. Diane had reappeared and was glowing with the particular satisfaction of a ward manager whose ward had just been recognized at the highest possible level. The clip was posted that evening. Wide angle, corridor, the moment at the door. You can see the stillness. You can see him stop talking, if you know what you're looking for. Most people in the comments section interpreted it as an argument. Some interpreted it as her being cold toward him. One account with 80,000 followers posted a 45-second video analysis titled "Body Language Expert Reveals the Truth About William and Kate's Tense Hospital Visit," which I watched twice and which reached a conclusion that missed the point so completely that I felt something close to grief. I didn't comment. I don't have any platform large enough to matter and I wouldn't know how to explain what I saw in a way that fits in a caption. But I know what I saw. I saw a man who had learned when to stop talking. I saw a woman who needed 1 second that wasn't owed to anyone else. I saw two people in a corridor outside a room that had asked something of them, finding their footing before the next room asked something else. That's not a scandal. That's a marriage. That's what a marriage looks like after a decade of being watched by everyone, after a room that required more than a handshake, after a floor you sat on because the moment needed it and the schedule didn't. That's two people being human in a corridor. And I was there because a photocopier jammed.